Welcome to another day in the Matrix. This is Red Pill Podcast 220, and I hope you're all having an amazing weekend. And I'm sure you're all well aware of what's going on in the world stage between Israel and Iran. Essentially, the World War III narrative is back in full force, unfortunately. And this is something I updated you all on yesterday with that additional weekly update, and I'm sure you all appreciated that. And as for No King's Day, I'll be honest, I personally did not tune into anything going on with that. I steered clear of that ritual, and I treated yesterday as one of those days to just protect my prana after I sent out that market update here on Patreon, and I'm really glad I did. And so far, the last Red Pill podcast has come to life yet again, following the decode I released for the full moon in June, which is now come and gone, and as well as Donald Trump's birthday, which was yesterday on June 14th. The accuracy proves itself in the charts, and because of that decode, our community here did not fall for that fake out pump that we had to kick off the week on Monday, June 9th, which was, of course, the day after the Red Pill podcast was released. And now you can see the patience pays off. And if you remember, this is actually a similar pattern that played out in 2017 and also 2020, which both of those patterns then led to the final phase of those crypto bull run cycles, including their alt seasons. And that's exactly what we're prepping for now here in 2025. So we have a lot to cover in today's podcast. So let's get straight into it. But quickly, before we get started, as always, make sure to get relaxed, get comfortable, grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea if it's a little earlier in the day, or a glass of wine or beer or any beverage of your choice if it's getting a little later out there in the Matrix. And also make sure to comment below this post here on Patreon to vote on the altcoins that you'd like me to cover in next week's Red Pill podcast. But before you leave that comment, just make sure you used the search function here on Patreon to check that I have not covered that project in at least 3 months. So if it has been over 3 months since I've reviewed that altcoin, or in the event that I've never covered that altcoin before, as long as it has at least 1 year of chart history, you can go ahead and comment below with the name of the altcoin, and please include the ticker symbol next to it as well. And whatever submissions get the most likes from our community members, those top 4 projects will be selected for next week's Red Pill podcast. Now let's get into this. Starting with what I just mentioned at the intro regarding the pattern that played out in 2020. And we're going to go head over there now to 2020 around this time frame here, post C19 crash recovery into the month of June. We're going to turn on our moon phases and see how this all went down. So you'll see that around the June full moon, we had a major impulse to the upside, which turned out to be a fake out. And then this followed with the post full moon correction into the date of June 15th, right here, which would be today, the day after Donald Trump's birthday. And I explained in the last Red Pill that I believe the reason why we have this price action into this particular date of June 15th, it had everything to do with sidereal astrology. I said the reason why this pattern played out to this specific date has to do with sidereal astrology, and this being the date that the sun moves from Taurus into Gemini in the actual sky around the date of June 15th into the 16th, which would effectively be tomorrow. And I also put emphasis on Gemini being ruled by Mercury. And the day of the week that's associated with Mercury is Wednesday. For those of you that speak Spanish, you know it's miércoles. This is tied to Mercury. And the first Wednesday after the sun moves into Gemini in sidereal astrology will be June 18th. And this is a very significant date for those that are interested in the markets, which you all are, because this will be the day that Fed Chair Jerome Powell will be spellcasting the markets and the world at the next Federal Reserve FOMC meeting, which we need to keep in mind, especially since that's this upcoming Wednesday during the 25th week of the year, which will be kicking off tomorrow, of course. And remember, that number 25 is our key number for this year, as we're in the year of 25 in the Gregorian system. That's how most of us would shorten this year. And then also in the Hebrew year of 5785, which adds up to 25 before reduction. And this clearly is an important system to consider, since Israel is the talk of the town again after what just happened a couple days ago and what's happening as we speak. Again, unfortunately. And please read the last update that I put out, because I think it's very important whenever we're getting our decodes correct in regards to the way that the market and the energy of the markets turns out. If it's because of lives being lost, nobody should be happy and feel like they got the prediction right. Because at the end of the day, real human lives matter a lot more than these digital candlesticks going up and down all day on a computer screen. And I think that it's great, of course, to have the ability to determine where markets will head, but also we need to be in our hearts and remind ourselves that these are the consequences, unfortunately. And one other thing to remind people of, and this is just to add a little bit more to the conversation, but not harp on the specific events too much, is just to remind people that war is profitable. It's really sad, but it's the truth. And you can just look back at any major events that have occurred, whether it's this local event that just happened and other similar events all throughout this year tied to Lebanon. I mean, you could look at the October 7th thing. You could look at what happened with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I mean, just zoom out and look at what the charts do afterwards. So it's an immediate scare. It's an immediate shakeout. But typically things, as war continues, unfortunately, the market gets very bullish. And I only say unfortunately because there's real human lives that get affected by this, of course. And we went over this quite a bit when analyzing the year of 1965, which we will also be talking about again a little bit later today, because the year of 1965 was the last year of the wood snake. So we're talking about the year of the snake in the Chinese zodiac system, and you'll see that this says wood snake for 1965, February 2nd through January 20th, 66, and that aligns with this year that we're in right now. So this is very important to consider 1965 because the United States of America directly entered a war that year. It was Vietnam, and interestingly enough, they entered it in the month of March. So the odds of the US being involved in war this year is very high, and it could even be a last minute thing, like a Pearl Harbor type situation where it gets activated in December. So there's still some time to go. It's not something that I want to happen, but I believe the writing's on the wall, and I believe most of you already see it for what it is. And also, apologies if my energy today is seeming very low. It's actually not. I'm just very calm. I needed that reset yesterday, and I also just want to deliver the most incredible and valuable analysis and decodes I possibly can, and I don't want to let any of this, all these distractions get in the way of the quality that I could provide you guys with. So I also just want to let you know how grateful I am for this community and how relaxed and chill, for the most part, everything's been over in our little world over here, regardless of all the things that have been happening on the world stage. So you guys are amazing. But getting back to this decode, we have this recent event. We're talking about the Hebrew calendar, bringing in the Hebrew year and all of these different elements and the significance of the number 25 and the fact that we're about to move into the 25th week of the year starting tomorrow. And this is the week that we'll have the FOMC meeting. And for those that have been following the decodes closely, you'll know that all the way back at the beginning of this year, when I released my Year of the Snake decode for 2025, I made sure to bring up the number 97. So I'm just going to point out the most significant event that's happened thus far in our year. But speaking of the number 97, it comes from the snake being the serpent. And this is like a more biblical terminology, of course. So we have the serpent 97. And the reason this matters is because 97 is the 25th prime number. All right. So we were just talking about the significance of the number 25 for this year. And it just so happens that on the 97th day of this year, April 7th, that ended up being the market crash bottom for the entire market, including Bitcoin and most cryptocurrencies, clearly showing the significance of this esoteric code that we discovered in advance. Well, speaking of the Hebrew year and the Hebrew calendar, of course, we need to consider Rosh Hashanah, the Hebrew New Year. And if we take from the upcoming date that we're decoding today of June 18th, very significant, as it's the first Wednesday since the sun is moving into the sign of Gemini. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Wednesday's Mercury day. This is your first Mercury day, etc., etc. Well, if we take from this day of June 18th and we tie it to Rosh Hashanah, which will be September 22nd, is our first day of Rosh Hashanah in the Gregorian system, you have 97 days apart. And we were just talking about how 97 is the 25th prime number. So this is absolutely crucial. Why? Because the Federal Reserve is mercurial. It is symbolic purely of Mercury. This is even why their logo is the eagle. The eagle is Mercury, Hermes. Look at the helmet and the sandals of Mercury. You have the eagle wings. So whenever you see Jupiter, Jove, or Zeus, and you see the eagle by his side, that is Mercury, his son. So very important you see the symbolism here and what's at play. But coming back to the main theme here of Mercury and the Federal Reserve System, this is why they're doing these they're having Fed Chair Powell speak on Wednesdays specifically. It's all a ritual. So getting back to this, we have so many things tied together. We have that 97 tied to the crash lows on April 7th, the 97th day of the year. 97 tied to serpent. Also, there's ties to Mercury and Hermes with the caduceus, which has the serpent wrapped around it. This is the snake is symbolic of Mercury. This is so important. This is all stuff that I covered inside of my Year of the Snake Decoded. And if you guys want to learn even more about this, specifically for cryptocurrency, consider checking out my decoding mastermind, because my decoding mastermind has the crypto decoding blueprint inside of it. So you can learn how to decode crypto, and that could be really, really powerful for you as an investor, and to be able to see through all of this stuff that's happening and know the true meaning behind the symbols, the words, and the numbers. And it'll effectively help you make better investment decisions. So coming back to this, if we were to not include the end date, it still works, because we have to the actual day of Rosh Hashanah, which is September 23rd, we have that connection right there. Not including the end date, perfectly 97 days apart from June 18th, clearly showing the significance of June 18th, this upcoming Wednesday during the Year of the Snake. And remember, 97, 25th prime, and this exact date of June 18th will be inside of the 25th week of the year. And this is why I believe also June 19th, the following day, will also be equally significant, because it has this key number. You can see it right there. We have the 25 date numerology, and also 6 plus 19, or 19 plus 6, however you want to look at it, adds up to 25. And it's tied to the 97th day of the year, which is April 7th, by 74 days. And this is very important because April 7th was our bottom for the market, written internationally, 7-4, 74 days later brings you to June 19th, right? This was all coded together perfectly. And we also showed some of the connections to this 47 code and 74 code for the upcoming 4th of July. Again, watch last week's Red Pill if you want to learn more about that. And of course, we'll continue to use this April 7th date since it's the extreme in the charts across the board, as it's our current local bottom pretty much for everything. So there you have it, June 18th and 19th tied to the significant date of our recent market crash bottom, which was exoterically caused by Trump's Liberation Day on April 2nd. And speaking of Trump, as most of you are aware, his birthday was yesterday on June 14th, and last week I already decoded that thoroughly, so I won't take up any of your time with that here. But what I do want to bring up is the additional element of the S&P 500 back in 1965, which is something I hinted to a little bit earlier and I believe will be fascinating for everyone here. So we're just going to scroll back to 1965. Again, that was the last year of the wood snake, the specific year that we're in here now in 2025. And here we are. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to turn off all this noise. Apologies if you guys hear any additional sounds in the background. It could get a little noisy around where I'm at right now. But we're going to take this step by step. This is actually analysis that I've done several times throughout this year, but I think it's great to recap it now that we're here in mid-June, halfway through the year. So when we look at the S&P 500 chart in 1965, you'll see some similarities. One, we initially topped before the first total eclipse of the year, and then we crashed through the eclipse, and we bottomed about 27 days after the eclipse. Let's look at our charts today. I'm going to pull up the S&P. Going to turn off all the noise to just make it nice and simple. And I'm going to show you from our top date on the 19th. We go over and we have, apologies. What I do want to actually show you is that we have from the eclipse of the 13th. And we're seeing our bottom is very close to that same measurement, but that's actually a side note. What I want to show you is something even more important, which is this top that we got over here on May 13th. And when we measure that to our extremes, to our lows, we get 47 days apart. Remember, April 7th is the 4-7 date, and Donald Trump is the 47th president, and that was how it just went this time around as well. Because when we measure how many days from our local top on the S&P on February 19th, it's 47 days later we crashed to the lows on 4-7. And it was caused by Trump, the 47th president, or so they say. That is absolutely mind-blowing. The fact that if you look at this year of the wood snake from our local top all-time high to the crash lows, it's 47 days, and it was the same back in 1965. Like, how? Absolutely crazy. Simulation confirmed. And look at that low spike that we had over here. If you look at the dates, it was June 14th into June 15th. This was something Bitcoin was doing too on these exact dates 50 years in the future. When we're talking about other examples that we've had even before the year of 2020. We reviewed that last week. So you see this major correction that we get into the 14th, 15th, and then we spike up. And that's kind of what we want to start talking about now. But notice how this was around the full moon. Well, also, we had highs around this May full moon in 1965, just like we recently had our highs around this May full moon. We were up here, by the way, but if you look at the Bitcoin chart, it was the same. So it's actually very similar in energy. I mean, we were pushed up so high around the May full moon that we created this big gap. So just amazing how many similarities there are. Also, from our current lows on April 7th, to where it will open up tomorrow on the charts is about 70 days. So we're taking from the absolute lows, measuring about 70 days into the future. And then we're going to do the same thing for the S&P. We're going to go from the lows over 70 days. It's going to bring you actually to September 7th, no matter how you do it, because it was a holiday, I believe. It was a Monday. I forgot the holiday. Is it Labor Day. I don't remember. Memorial Day, one of those. Anyways, apologies, I don't remember, but we had a holiday, I'm assuming, right there, and that's why the market was closed on that Monday. And you can see 70 days brings us to September 7th, no matter pretty much how you look at it, from the lows. Now, on September 7th, we actually opened at 88 points. And if you look at how much room we had ahead to recover, which would be to here, it was about 2.9%. Now, let me show you where if we were to, and again, I have to be 100% transparent. I'm not sure where we'll actually open with the S&P tomorrow, but if you measure from the weekly close, which we're about to do, you can see from where we are to the all-time high is almost 2.9% away. This is freaky, right? Like it's so weird. Like how? How? How could we be the same amount of days from the all-time high to the exact crash? And then if you take from the crash lows to where we are today, we're at the same percentage away from retesting the same highs? How? How? Have we had AI for 100 years and we just don't know about it? And bots have been running this market, ever since? Maybe the elite have a lot of experience with stuff that they wait and wait and wait to allow us to play with. You know how it goes. Anyways, now we have a couple things to consider because we want to use this data to see how things are likely to turn out, as we've been doing very accurately lately. So we have a couple things to point out. One is the fact that after the June full moon in 1965, we had a quick recovery and then another shakeout into the June new moon. Okay, now consider the fact that we had eclipses in different spots in 1965 versus this year. And that's exactly why, if you go back to my decode before we even had, we're talking about almost a year ago, guys, actually over a year ago, because this information came out in May of 2024. I explained that if we're going to use 1965, please consider the placement of the eclipses. I said we will top before the eclipse on the stock market and we will crash through it. This is all stuff that I've already covered. And then I said March and April will be your worst months, and then we will likely recover and push higher before September 7th total lunar eclipse. So it was all based on the eclipse dates. That was what was most important, not just looking at it day by day, without any other application of other significant things that I use in my decoding system, of course. So with that being said, we do have this to look ahead. And then we also have this if we wanted to entertain that. Because if we were to take from the recovery target, which is somewhere around here, and the fact that we have a new moon ahead, this could mean that we could actually push up and hit a new all-time high before the 24th of this month. Why not? And then also what we can see is that we have a little bit of a pullback tied to that new moon. So both of these examples, the lows were associated with the following new moon, and then they marked the absolute lows before pushing higher. So this means if we just isolate these two data points of right here and right here, we have a very positive outlook ahead. But we have to get through the June new moon. And now that we've thoroughly explored this, let's recap the similarities to the 2020 C19 crash following up from last week's analysis. So we're going over to here. And we're pretty much doing the exact same thing that we're doing right now, by the way. But you'll see that on June 8th, similar to what we just did, we topped on the June full moon. Then we had a quick pullback over the, I want to say it's about 5 trading sessions. Yeah, 5 trading sessions. It's going to turn out to be one whole week just because the stock market is closed on the weekends naturally. So we have 5 trading sessions. We bottomed and then we pivoted higher. You can see that we recovered slightly into the following new moon on June 22nd, and then we had another short-lived pullback that pivoted with a higher low, so holding trend and structure. About 4 trading days after, Yep. And then we kept it moving to the upside all the way until September 2nd with new all-time highs, by the way. And you'll see that on this whole pattern right now from here to here is pretty much what we've been mimicking, like perfectly. So I think what we have is a situation like this. I am not entertaining this crazy sharp move to the downside, at least for the stock market. I think this right here is what happened on April 7th, and it has a relationship with the eclipses. Okay, so I think this is over, but it's not me just completely denying and writing off the possibility for us to have a post new moon correction, because that's a normal theme, especially for crypto and Bitcoin. And you could see it right here. We have June new moon correction. It's not that bad, but it is a correction after the June new moon. So you must keep that in mind. And by the way, in 1965, it was also about 4 trading days after the new moon that the correction was complete. And that would align with like around our monthly close. So if I was to show you, we have June 25th. I'm just going to quickly plug that in over here. And we have, let's call it June 30th, if we wanted to say the full time frame. Yeah, so it's like pretty much leading into the final weekend of June, the final weekly close time frame. I would say Monday the 30th would make sense to be a pivot, latest. All right, so this gives us a roadmap for how the next couple weeks can shake out. And if we were to continue to follow the C19 situation, then the bottom should be tomorrow. We should be pivoting tomorrow into Tuesday. That would make the most sense. And if we were to look at it as 5 trading days off of the lows, let me just quickly show you. Or 5 trading days off the highs, apologies. Yeah, it's still Monday. If we were to do 5 trading sessions, it's a Wednesday. That's the... Okay, so I think that gives us a lot to work with. So I already touched on a lot of this in last week's Red Pill regarding my thoughts on the upcoming 4th of July and how that could be ritualized. But when looking at these patterns, the worst of it, in quotes, the worst of it, can be over by June 18th. When we're measuring the dates, as I'm showing you right here, and comparing everything. And we'll have to see how we react to that FOMC meeting, which of course lands on that exact date. And another thing to consider, especially since we're more focused on crypto here, when you look at the NASDAQ back in 2020 during this recovery phase, we actually bottomed about 4 trading days after the June full moon, and then we pushed into price discovery. So let me show you on the NASDAQ. So we're talking about here. We had a correction about 4 trading days after the June full moon, and then we just pushed into new all-time highs and continued into price discovery. So it would be crazy if we actually see the NASDAQ start to recover tomorrow and then push up into a new all-time high for the upcoming new moon, which would be on the 25th. As that would be a nearly identical recovery to the C19 crash with the moon phases too, which makes it even crazier. And of course, these are the things you come here for and the stuff you won't hear anywhere else. Now, before we move on, let's entertain something that happened in 1965, which was this really harsh correction that bottomed on the upcoming new moon. On the exact day of the new moon, actually, you could see the blue circle right there, and we were very low, right? We'll call this considering the worst case scenario, which of course is important for us here since we can't just hide from the data that's right in front of our faces, even if it hurts to look at, because at the end of the day, that's what being a sophisticated investor and trader is all about. Keeping your emotions on the sidelines in the process and analyzing the data that's available to us. So now let's get into the Bitcoin chart and explore what happened over the past 5 years or so during the months of June and July, which is what we're now going to start focusing on quite a bit because this seems to be a very pivotal time for markets. So we're going to start with last year. And we're going to see that we actually did have a pretty nasty flash correction for this new moon and this new moon here. It's the July and August new moons. And even starting out June, where we were very high on the June new moon, it followed with a correction. So negative, 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 right? I do have a fractal that I could show you a little bit later, which actually shows that this August crash right here is very similar to the correction that we just had on April 7th. And this correction we just got here were tied to the lows that we had in March. And this recovery style that we're in right here, or these this whole move is kind of like what we're in right now. We're up near top and we're just kind of chopping, getting a lot of rejections, but we just kind of like pushed straight to current all-time highs, and we have a lot more thin air up here than we did down here because Bitcoin's traded through here in the past quite a bit. We're like pretty much in price discovery. We are in price discovery right now. So the fact that Bitcoin's had this 30% correction and we've had a V-shaped recovery out of it, it's very similar to 2017. And we'll talk about that also in a moment. Perhaps anybody who studied the older markets, 2017 was just Bitcoin continuing up higher and higher with 30% drops along the way. So you had over here, you had this 20 something percent drop. Over here was definitely a full 30% drop. And then we've just recently had another 30% drop. It's looking very similar to 2017. And the fact that we're holding structure and continuing is amazing. So if we play out like 2017, this is just a side note, if this all plays out like 2017 and we go up into September and then get a 30% correction around the September lunar eclipse, but then we recover and go higher into October, November, I won't be mad. I think that would be amazing. Okay, I know it's taking longer and everyone wants to get rich yesterday, but guys, this would be ideal actually in many ways. So I'll maybe discuss that more, but I don't think I really need to right now. You should kind of understand what I mean. And again, if we were to have Bitcoin dominance push down about 10% and we only get a 400 or 500% move for all of the altcoins, that's not really like an alt season, okay? Like a real alt season is when you see Bitcoin dominance crater, to below 40%, and then you start seeing every random altcoin in harmony, including Ethereum, push into price discovery, or at least get close to prior all-time highs, which is something we saw in Solana. So yeah, like if we want a real, actual, true alt season, I would rather it take longer. And I know that's not what everyone wants to hear, but ultimately we were right about getting an additional push higher past the March eclipse, because when we got this correction during the March eclipse, people were starting to doubt my thesis on how this will go leading into September. And Bitcoin has proven that it will do these recoveries like it did over here, where we got the start of our lunar cycle. We chopped, sure, big correction, sure, but we recovered and we pushed higher. I mean, I don't think this scenario is going to play out again where we only get a slightly higher push. That'd be pretty messed up. But the fact that we've already gotten so high, hit a new all-time high recently, and we would have all the way until November, that makes me pretty confident that Bitcoin at least has 120, 140, potentially 150 ahead, 150K Bitcoin, of course. But I'm personally leaning more towards the 120 to 140 range. I'm not a believer that will go significantly higher than that, at least not right now. We'll have to see how it goes. And this is actually something I explored over here. I drew it out. I showed you guys the push for Bitcoin maybe to 120 to 130, and then that 30% pullback, and then one more push higher to like 150, maybe 160. That would be brutal. But that's how 2017 went. That's exactly 2017. We were just pushing up into price discovery, 30% pullback, pushed higher, 30%, and then it pushed and pushed and pushed until obviously we were in the time frame where there was no more to give. There's no new money entering the market, and it was in peak euphoria. Right now, we're not in euphoria. Retail is scared. Retail doesn't even want to buy these discounts. It's pretty much just the big players right now. So, anyways, let's get to the prior example of 2023, and we're gonna explore June, July, and we've actually talked about this quite recently because it was around a Bitcoin event. I believe it was Bitcoin Miami. We pushed down lower past it, and then we had this pivot on the dates of June 14th and 15th, just like the pattern we decoded last week, and then we actually had a nice push up into the July new moon. But that did in fact mark a local top before another pullback. So we do need to just consider that, right? But I mean, fuck, if Bitcoin was to push to 120 right now and that was it, that would be great. That'd be enough, in my opinion. Even if Bitcoin had a breakdown from 120 down to 100,000, and then Bitcoin dominance collapsed during that process, that flood of liquidity into the alts would be crazy. So we don't really need Bitcoin to go too much higher at this point to see some pretty solid moves in the alts. Again, if you don't believe that and you don't agree with that, that's fine. Feel free to share your thoughts. I'm welcome to the doubt there. And, you know, it's just I've been through this before. Like there was a lot of doubt coming in March, and I was pretty sure that Bitcoin would go at least to a new all-time high before the September total lunar eclipse, and we got it. So it's plenty to play out, especially while Bitcoin dominance is sitting at 64% and we have no new all-time high in Ethereum just yet. Very strange for that to not happen. So then we have the 2022 example where Bitcoin bottomed into June 18th, which aligns with our decode today. And we also had a quick recovery into the following new moon plus a correction. But that marked a local low, and we technically were in somewhat of an uptrend, micro uptrend until the August time frame. But keep in mind, in 2022, that was in the midst of a bear market, so I don't want to put too much weight on that example besides the June full moon correction we're now clearly seeing here in our local market across the board, especially for the altcoins. Then we have 2021. Bitcoin full moon lows in June, and we do in fact get a correction to follow after this new moon. That's ahead. But keep in mind, Bitcoin put on 80% gains pretty much over the following 7 weeks after this bottom. So even if we were to entertain this scenario and we measured, let's just say 4 days before the July full moon, and then we took 49 days from July 6th, I believe would be how it works out. This will bring you magically into August 23rd. This is literally right there for our upcoming new moon in August. It's on the day if you don't include the end date. Or sorry, if you include the end date. So this absolutely still checks out from my analysis I've been sharing with you guys all year about the August new moon. And after the August new moon, I do suspect we'll get an August new moon flash correction. We almost always do. So how much can we do between now and then is really the question. And if we did the same measurement for 2020, Bitcoin technically traded to the lowest point around July full moon. Let me show you, just so you have a visual and you know I'm not just like pulling this stuff out of nowhere. So we have there the July full moon. We have about 8 days before is like the technical daily close low. We're really splitting hairs here, but I just want to show you like the lengths that I'm going to right now to get you guys to see what's ahead. Like I want this to be accurate and I want you to have all the information to work with. So 8 days prior would align with around July 2nd to July 3rd if we were to consider that. And then we also topped 51 days after, as you can see right there, perfectly into the August new moon. And 51 days later, aligns with the day before the August new moon, just like it would have back here. And that was a rise of, let me just show you by the percentages. If I take from the lows to the top, that was a 40% move. Like if Bitcoin made a 40% move right now, it would go to 140K, just so you're aware. So I know it looks kind of arduous and boring as shit until somewhere in the middle of July, and then we just go parabolic. And it really shakes a lot of people out. Like a lot of people are not expecting this kind of move. And all of this data tells me that if we are to get a correction before the July full moon, that by the end of July, we can be trading at all-time highs, regardless of where we start the month of July. Just like we saw last year, and 2021, and 2020, and 2017, and even 2013, which was the last year of the snake and the only other year of the snake where crypto traded in the past. Now, the only thing that would be really devastating for crypto investors is what happened in 2017. Even though the way things turned out at the end of the day were insanely bullish, I could definitely imagine living through that move in July 2017 would not be fun. And I'm talking about this right here. So let me quickly show you that before we dive in. Make sure my mic is working. Good. Especially since we've had similarities to this 2017 fractal in our current chart. Remember, Bitcoin rallied all April and May into the May new moon and then had a correction over here. We topped on the May new moon and then it followed with a quick pullback, a very quick rebound up until the June full moon. Same thing we just did. Literally, that was your June full moon. Recovery almost back to like a micro double top. It's pretty incredible. Like the fact that we pulled off that big of a move into just Monday. I mean, Bitcoin had a $4,500 candle on Monday. So we had this major recovery into the June full moon. And then we get a quick pullback after it into what day? June 15th. And then we see a recovery into the following new moon, which is also a theme that we've seen throughout today's podcast and several iterations that we've already reviewed. And then you can see that Bitcoin actually chops around a little bit. And then we get to the July full moon, which was on July 9th. And this year it'll be on July 10th, just so you're aware. And we could clearly see that after this date, Bitcoin had a liquidation ritual. Basically, I think this was done to like do a sentiment reset and probably a leverage reset. So it was just to reset the sentiment, you know, push up super bullish, chop, make people feel like, oh, we're about to, nope, pull back. This type of move right there is typically how Bitcoin likes to trade, where it does a very sharp pullback in a sideways consolidation range before pushing higher. Okay. I mean, are we going to rip the Band-Aid off this week? Has it already been ripped off? Or are we, going to kind of just J-curve out of this? It's very tough to tell, but based on everything we've explored already, by mid to late July, Bitcoin should be in price discovery. And since we've already hit 110K, that means that 120K at the end of July should be in the bag. Now, I have this, we'll get to that a little bit later. A couple of these ideas, but that would be like this idea. If we're going to do it now, then it would obviously be very soon. Or if we're going to do it in the middle of July, that would mean that we would have a 2-month sideways trading range trading on top of the prior cycle peak. That's not unhealthy, by the way. That would be very healthy. And that means if Bitcoin was to push much, much higher, then the pullback zone could maybe actually support us around the 97 to 98K territory, which, again, I know many of you probably don't care as much about like what are Bitcoin's upside targets or downside targets, because most of you, including myself, are using Bitcoin as like the energy. You're using this awareness to determine the energy of the altcoin. Like, what are the altcoins going to do in the event that Bitcoin does insert idea, and that's the whole point of what we're doing here. So this is very, very unorthodox to see this type of move, but I think it was done for a reason. I'm not saying we will do it exactly the same, but during this whole move, you can see that just 4 days later, Bitcoin had a 27% candle. Bitcoin literally recovered back to the top the following Thursday. So, is it that bad? I don't think so, because if you look at how we traded into the following August new moon, we were much higher, and then of course we topped out at the start of September. So from this local top over here to this top, Bitcoin went up another 64%. Now again, if we only did half of that and we did a 30% move, that would be $130,000 Bitcoin, give or take. So, yeah, I feel like something like this might occur if we were to have a clean 4 year cycle, which would be a push up again into the end of August or very early September, and then get a eclipse correction, maybe 30%, and then Bitcoin just heads up higher. And when you look at Bitcoin's monthly performance, the seasonality, I mean, all the data is in October, November. Like it's mostly November that we have hit our all-time highs. That was the case in 2013. Bitcoin hit the all-time high. In 2017, we did technically hit the all-time high in December, but it was November where most of the gains were. And then in our last cycle, November 2021, that was the all-time high when Bitcoin hit 69K or whatever. So yeah, it's like it would be crazy for us to go all the way up to November, but hey, we did it in 1965, the last year of the wood snake. Some people might be saying like, well, are you like, what do they say? They say like pushing the goalpost. No, that's not how it works, man. I would actually like us to extend out in the cycle to the end of the year, and I've already explained all year why. It's just I haven't seen Bitcoin pass the second total lunar eclipse of a lunar cycle bullish. I just haven't seen it yet. So until Bitcoin does it, I can't I can't make art that shares that idea. It would be called lying. So yes, this is why, especially with it being a total eclipse, not just a partial or penumbral, it's a fucking total lunar eclipse. I gotta be honest. But maybe the fact that in 2026, and I've sort of explored this a little bit, we start going into total solar eclipses as soon as February 17th, that could mean that we have that weird window from September through February where we could actually J curve up into the final phase of the year again. That would be insane if we did that. Like a complete repeat of 1965 into 1966. That would blow my mind. But any of you that followed my work last year, you saw how similar 1964 was to last year of the dragon. Like it was so identical. So fuck, man, if that's the way they're going to do it, then whatever. Like this is a glorious time to have altcoins, because if you look at where Bitcoin was, let me just quickly show you so you have an idea of like what I mean by all of this. If you look at where Bitcoin was trading at in June, and this is the Ethereum chart, this is what Ethereum did from June 2020 to the peak. This was February 2022. It went up 800%, and this is ETH. To the full top, it went up 1,800%. So when you zoom out and you look at the all-time highs up here, and we're like comparing it to here, when I zoom out over here, you can see like it's looking higher, of course, an example, but still like we're not near the all-time high. And once we pivoted till this Q4 timeframe, you see that's November 2020. This thing went up in a straight line, 500% over 3 months. Again, this is ETH. This is like the slow moving dinosaur of everything that we normally talk about in altcoin world. So if we can get a 500% move on ETH, we can get a 6 to 700% move on XRP for sure. I wouldn't even doubt that, especially now that we don't have any lawsuit bullshit to discuss over there. So yeah, I know that's a lot to unpack, but let's get back on track. We have this comparison over here to 2017, this liquidation event into July 16th, quick rebound back, full recovery just 4 days later. And then we were pushing up higher into August. So the good news is if we entertain this, if we entertain this move based on price action, we'd look to our current lows in the range, which would be here at 100,500 Bitcoin. Call it 100K. That would be comparable to the level here. Now, I know it doesn't look like the same data, but we're looking at all the way back to October 2024 in this chart, and this is just showing you April of like 2 months ago. So I could zoom in more and give you an idea. If I was to zoom in more on this chart, you'd understand. Maybe I could do it like this. So we have the May new moon top over here. We have the May new moon top. We have a quick correction, and that quick correction marked the low, just like here. Then you can see when I hold the cursor over here, it's the same level that we retested in June or July 17th. So think about that. Also, by the way, this day, June 5th, this was when we had the Elon Trump drama, and isn't it crazy how we corrected lower from that event than what just happened in Israel and Iran? Like absolute clown world. But anyways, when you see how the fractal played out in 2017, you'll see that this correction into mid-July turned out to be like a double bottom, effectively retesting the lows from the initial correction that we got before having all this chop. So does this mean Bitcoin will chop around in our local like 103K over here to about 108K over here for the next month before retesting 100K one more time before we shoot up to a new all-time high by the end of July? Sure, that would actually be in alignment with the seasonality, where we get not the best results in June and July. But leading into the end of July, we've seen some crazy moves, and I've shown you that in many examples now. So what's great about this, though, is this was still an overall very bullish example. It was a very bullish outcome for even having this flash correction that happened in mid-July. So as long as overall we see expansion in the market, then there should be no complaints if it takes an extra couple days or extra couple weeks to kick off, especially when this 2017 fractal shows the same thing in all my other examples, which is another new all-time high in August. And you can see Bitcoin rallied all the way into the start of September before having the next notable correction. So even this example is overall bullish. And what's most important about what we just covered is that what I'm about to show you in the Bitcoin dominance chart for July 2017, and you'll see that around July 13th, let me show you over here. So this is July 13th. July 11th into July 13th. This was around the time Bitcoin was having that pullback that we were I was just showing you. Well, Bitcoin dominance crashed almost 40% in about a week during that move. Pretty wild, right? Now, I don't think Bitcoin dominance will break down that much this upcoming July, but I do suspect we'll see the final impulse to the upside before it starts to break down. Unless, of course, we get that clean 4-year cycle concept, which, of course, I can entertain. I've said it several times now. But first, I'd like to focus on what happens between now and the upcoming total lunar eclipse on September 7th and take it one step at a time until then. And please, for anyone who's hearing me talk about Q4, don't get it twisted. Don't get confused. We're tracking this as we go, okay? That's what matters most. This isn't about making some grandiose prediction, okay? It's about being profitable. So we can throw numbers and ideas out into, and just try to make it stick on the walls. But ultimately, all that matters is, are you able to position yourself effectively when the markets are oversold, and prepare yourself for markets to eventually become overbought? And will you de-risk or take profits when that time comes? So how was I speaking back in February and March? You could read every single update. I used the word de-risking ad nauseum. Every single time I made an update, I said, consider de-risking, over and over and over again, way before we hit April. Okay. So have you heard me use the term de-risking lately? Absolutely not. Okay. We need to adjust as the seasons change, right? Like, just like getting ready for the harvest in agriculture. It's very similar here in the markets. So now that we've gone through all of that, let's get into these charts and review the setup into the week ahead, as well as our upcoming weekly close later today. So I'm going to be getting into the Bitcoin. And isn't it crazy? This is the C19 fractal overlaid, and it's just mind-blowing. And you could see it pushes into price discovery like first week of July. Be crazy, right? Oh, even crazier, look at how it's bashing on the underside of this major trend line. So we have this trend line that's been in play all the way since the end of 2023. And it was holding as a support until we had the crash. And it shows that we can touch back at the top of it at the end of July into the middle of August, which aligns perfectly with my theory about Bitcoin and crypto market. And then, yes, it does show us moving up again after a correction into the month of October, November, which is like, dude, if that's how we're going to do it again, like a perfect mimic of 2020 into 2021, 2022, there we go. That could be our next bottom. July 26. Does that make sense? Yes, because it's moving into August, the final. Oh yeah, I guess that would make the most sense. Anyways, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. So let's get into the Bitcoin chart. Just do a quick daily analysis. We don't want to take too much time with that because we spent so much time on the Bitcoin play, and you guys already get it. I don't want to even spend too much time in these ideas, because this is stuff that we've already covered in last week's Red Pill, and it's kind of copy paste at this point because we're trading at the same point as we were last Sunday, by the way. So all the analysis that I shared last week is still applicable today. Now, we've gotten a bunch of punches into the 34 daily EMA. I like to see it, but clearly holding that is pretty important. Although we have the 55 SMA that is now pushing up, and it's around 103K. I think by tomorrow it will start to close closer to 103K. And that's a major support for us right now because we have all of that happening back at the beginning of May. And remember the May 8th candle, I talked about it a million times. I was warning that we are likely to fill that candle for most of the altcoins. And as you can see over here, we have total 3 has fully filled the May 8th candle. It's undeniable now. Others, same story. Filling that candle was important because this was nonsense. Again, I know some people might hate to hear that, but it just is. Like, it just can't do. Ooh, I haven't looked at this. Okay. No, I don't think this is going to turn out this way. That'd be fucking wild. That'd be wild. If we recover on June 18th, because that Fed meeting is just like ultra bullish, mamma mia. Okay, let's hope. Well, that'd be dope. This would be dope. That'd be dope. If all the pullback talk can just be behind us. It's boring, ain't it? It's boring me. All right, so we have the 55 SMA. Just keep that in mind. I think closing below the 55 wouldn't look good right now. So I don't want to see us closing below the 55 for too long. I mean, I could accept a swipe down, of course, to the lower targets that we've entertained, but like, Sure, get to the 97, 98, but it has to be quick. It has to be quick. Quick flash, buy up, okay? It can't spend too much time down there. We have also this major trend line that we've pierced through before. I know it's a lot of noise on these charts right now, but you can see this major green trend line. It's been going on since the end of 2022. Bounce, traded around it, bounce, traded, back tested it, bounce, traded into it, crashed below it really quickly after the tariff nonsense, and then bounced. And right now, where it's sitting at is somewhere around 90. Like if we were to crash tomorrow, it'd go to 95. So I mean, we can go lower than it for sure, but it's been holding us since the start of our bull run. So very, very important. And generally, you can see by October, it's already like clearing 115K. So I think this trend line matters a lot. There's probably a way I could clean it up a little bit more, but I'm going to just leave it as it is. I like this trend line the way that it is right now. Ultimately, though, we are now just back testing our resistance from at the end of last year, earlier this year. That is bullish. The fact that we're back testing that resistance, I would call that a very big development for Bitcoin. All right, you could see it clearly here. So I'm going to hold my cursor at this December 9th candle and look to the right. You seeing what I'm seeing? We're holding above it and we're closing weeklies above it. I mean, it's very much indecision candles lately, but that's just kind of like, that's what happens when your asset is this big now. Like, can't always just be pumpy forever. We had 7 weeks of green. Like now it's time for a little bit of sideways. So we're holding on the 8 simple. I like to see that. The weekly moving averages are all in bullish posture, so there's really nothing more to report. You already know the downside targets. 97, maybe 98 is, I think 100K is enough right now. I don't think Bitcoin needs to go much lower. It's stealing so much dominance from the alts, and alts look like shit right now, and that's like where retail gets the most scared. So that's typically when we see big pivots to the to a very bullish and greedy market. Let's move on to Ethereum. It's going to be a quick one on ETH because, yeah, look at this. I'm on the weekly candles on ETH. What the fuck could I say? It's the same. It doesn't want to break out. It keeps getting rejected consistently at 2.7. Doesn't matter. People have been getting mad at me the way I've been talking about ETH lately, which is weird. I was like, yo, this is the wolfpack. Why are you getting emotional? Who cares? You're not Vitalik. You didn't make this shit. Why are you worried? So weird. People are weird. People get mad at weird shit, you know? Anyways, we're at the hour mark in the red pill, so it's going to get spicier and quicker and more robust. You can see we have this major trend line, undeniable support up until this moment here. And when I saw this correction on ETH, this made me like go, ugh, that's a 66% correction in the midst of a bullish recovery that still couldn't break into price discovery. I don't love that. Now, I get the argument with the Solana part of the conversation, but anywho, we're now brushing up against this trend line, and it's clear. What? Resistance. Clear. We can't break above it. Now, I think this is why Bitcoin needs to enter price discovery, because then it will give relief to this eventually. But on this correction down here was the lowest ETH dominance has been in quite a while. So this massive rally back up, I think it better hold. Because if this can hold and we start closing back below this 2,350, that's going to look scary. Very, very scary for the entire altcoin market. So I don't love this quick rally up. And when we look at last year, this was around the same time. So we have the full moon of May holding up until June, and then trending down towards that full moon, and then a break even lower in the July new moon. So far, that's not the story. This looks better than this. But yeah, remember when we had this correction to this pump over here, that was the fastest we saw an oversold RSI flip into an overbought RSI ever in the history of ETH. So this was an absolute like just washout, you know, in both directions. That's it, you know, until we break back above 3,000. I think we're just going to be dealing with a little bit more chop until Bitcoin makes a decision. If Bitcoin is indecisive, ETH will be indecisive. That's probably the best way to summarize it. Now we have XRP, which everyone's really excited about because of recent videos that I made. And I think the fact that we just got a little flash into yesterday, but we're holding the level overall even a little bit higher. Oh, actually, the same daily close that we got back at the end of May. And it's all on this 382. This is a very nice thing for us. So we have a swing high to swing low fib pull. We've pushed into the golden pocket. We've since gotten rejected down here. I know some people are going to say, well, this is a head and shoulders, but zoom out. Zoom out. We're just holding a weekly recovery structure in general. And it's just been how many weeks now? How many days? Almost 200 days of XRP pretty much closing most daily candles above $2. Now compare that to most of the altcoin market that has made a similar move up. Now XRP is about 30% down from tops, but a lot of altcoins are really bad shape. They're 70 to 80% down from local tops. I know there's a couple of great examples of things that are not doing that, but XRP has actually been holding up very well. So from a technical perspective, I don't have anything to worry about with these current charts. Now, lastly, what I'll say is this fractal. We've been really closely tracking this fractal. It's not perfect. I don't expect it to be perfect, so don't take it like that. But I do think there's something powerful about the way that this can all turn out, given that we see the mid-July pump. And that's something that also aligns with Bitcoin. That I like. So we're holding this fractal for the most part. It does show us a little danger right there, like into June 29th, 30th, into July 2nd. Could that be a higher low? Yes. So we can see here that this major spike down was in alignment with this low over here in the fractal. And then actually, let me make the fractal a little easier for you to see. Okay, so we have rally high, start of a little bit of a pullback, another rally high, and then you see if I moved it like that, how similar this looks. So then we come down with the lows, we rally back up, same. We have some chop, sure, and then come down again, perfect. Rise up, chop to the lows, perfect. You see where that is? And then we rise up, and then from here we have some weakness. So since we've had a push down, you see a push down, 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 and down. It's a lot of chop at the lows. And then the release happens into, well, potentially July. Let's call it like by the second week of July, this should be at new all-time highs, unless Bitcoin does what it did in that last example of 2017. But still, we know that this can all play out in a couple of days. Like, look at XRP going low and then again low before rising up 160% in 13 days. So even if we traded into July 7th low, we can have a full recovery and have the month end 200% up. Let me show you. That's 3 weeks, almost 3 weeks, 200%. Why can't that happen in July? Bitcoin's done it in July, so this project can do it in July. Just keep that in mind. And I guess a lot also is banking on Bitcoin dominance and perhaps some other local narratives tied to Ripple and XRP. All right, now we have about 5 additional altcoins to look at, starting with Giga Chad. What the hell are we doing, guys? What the fuck is this? What are we doing? Giga Chad? Come on. We're better than this. What is this nonsense? All right, joke's over. We're having fun. Okay, massive bear flag, but I'm not going to call it that because of where we're at. Oh, no, that's not the way I like to do it. I always like to mark out horizontal trading ranges first because when I do this, I want it to be educational. I want you guys to learn something. Dotted line, where did that come from? I will keep it white. It's actually what I like to do. I don't like to pull the fib first. I like to draw my horizontal lines first and then draw the fib after. I'm going to make that red because I think that's a very significant area. All right, big liquidity zone from 3 cents up to 7, right? So, but that 3 cent level is really troublesome. And I'm going to show you why. Because during this initial pump up and the grind to this ultimate top, probably a very notable bearish divergence was forming here. Yep. And then after you have this major drawdown, which was 90%. This was from Trump's inauguration, by the way. Why are we looking at this? Why are we looking at whatever? This had a 90% correction after Trump's inauguration, which, by the way, guys, was just like earlier this year. This is like what a whole bear market does. This thing did in 50 days. Okay, now we've come back to the same level that was the breakdown zone. And you could see a couple of areas of interest where we have pivots, right? So a major pivot here to the upside. Not quite getting back to it, but I'm going to do that because I can see a little bit of support hold with the bounce and then a couple of rejections here. So that's clean. All right, let's just call it 3 cents though. We don't need to get super fancy. Let me check my mic. Okay. That's the area that once you could break above, this thing should be shooting back to around 6 cents pretty rapidly. I would say it could do that in just a couple weeks. Now we do have a rising support trend line that I think is pretty noticeable right there. So as it's coming back to this 382 level and it's trying its best to hold on to 2 cents, I think we're running into some late stage trouble here. And what happens with stuff like this is because it's like a random altcoin that could lose 90% of its value in the midst of everything else being like, I mean, whatever. That's just really bearish. But meme coins, right? Sorry, let me. Now, as you grind up in this structure, what tends to happen is something like this. So it punches down below your trend line and then it gets bought back up, rejected at the outside of the major support, gets a quick move down, which could make people speculate that this is a wrap, but it's not. And then it breaks through. So this type of chop here is very elusive, right? It's the same thing with the way this crashed. It was just a perpetual, like 2 month long, losing all of its value sort of thing. Panic selling back to where it launched. Yep. Now, I would not personally invest in this because there's so many other opportunities. Like you look, this is a return to 300%. Well, like Doge, for instance, which hasn't been performing so well lately, just getting back to all-time highs is 300%. And this is a project that has much more stability and obviously a lot more going on with the charts of the past because very few people know this, but Doge has a chart that goes back to 2014. And every time it hits the 1618, last cycle it went even higher, which I don't think will happen this time, but entertaining the 1618 here at this almost $4 would be glorious. Not to compare one thing to the other, I'm just stating my feelings here on Giga Chad. I want to see what this logo is. It's literally Giga. That's the. What's the logo? I can't see the logo. It's like some dude. What? Gay? No, I'm just kidding. Not funny. It's a bad joke. Stop. All right, dude. I don't know. This is have fun. Have fun. I don't know why we're looking at this project. This got the most votes this week, by the way. Giga chat. What are we doing, guys? What are we doing? All right, now we're looking at Athena. Just balance out the no. It's also all right. These are two new projects. We're gonna try to at least do 1 to 2 new projects every week. That's important. It's like a roast. Oh, why do I keep doing that? I have to. I'm too comfortable right now. So we have to get a couple key lines here. Not a lot to work with. Sometimes when I have charts like this, I need to put it in an area and I need to put it on like a weekly. Okay, yeah. This is do something like this in the middle of the range and then do something like this. That's good enough for me. Return back to normal. Put it on the daily. Okay, yeah. We're like a pretty much around those supports. And then we're probably below the 236 here. Yep, of course we are. All right, this is below the 236, so major move up into before like the beginning of the year. Also lost about 80% of its value, so pretty harsh drawdown. Also kind of seeing a similar rising structure, so it's tempting to hold higher lows. I guess that's fine. But note that Bitcoin was trading at like 100. This should be trading at least where Bitcoin's trading, like to show you that, yeah, there's a better trade here. But that's all coin world. This also has about 400% to get back to all-time highs. I have no idea what this project's about, but it looks a little less stupid than this one. Giga Chad. I'm not gonna stop. So bad. Okay. Yeah, so typically when we have these sorts of tops right here, we know that these liquidity zones from the 382 all the way up to the 888 are very important. So I know a lot of you guys started using the 888 because of me. It's really dope that that has kind of shown, it's been shown to work, like it works. Not just some random number that I pulled out of nowhere. It's very, very important to consider adding the 888 fib, in my opinion, especially on downside targets too when you do reverse fibs. But what we're seeing here is clear resistance, and it's at this 88 level. So I think if we get above this 48, let's call it 50 cent level, you have a quick swipe up to this zone of about $1.20. There's no structure here though to work with. This is actually in price discovery to the downside. So as for entertaining something like a Wyckoff or any of that, no, you just can't. I also don't know if I could entertain this $5 level, but one second, I'm gonna take a sip of water. All right, check my levels. We're good. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. $5 is possible. That would be insane. No, it's possible. I'd say it's possible. I wouldn't bank on it though, but I would say it's possible. Which means I'd be like taking profits at like four. We'll put 450 here just for fun. Yeah. Because that swipe from 4 to the 550 area could happen, even 350 to 550 could happen in a day. It's only a 50% move. This is very normal for an altcoin to hit 50% in a single day. I just showed you back an example of Bitcoin hitting 20 something percent in a single day. This went 38% in a single day. This first launch, I mean, it's 46% on the second day. This one's, yeah, there's plenty of examples of some pretty big candles, 27% in a single day. So, yeah, that's the way a top could form. where you can swipe from 350 to 550 in one day and then never touch those prices again, never touch four again. Excuse me, and then you just cascade to the downside from there. So that's why I usually, like, whenever I'm setting take profit on stuff like this, even though I know it can make it higher, like let's just call it 6 max, I would still take my profits even maybe slightly lower than 4, or I would just 3, 320, 340, 360, 384, something like that. Get out the same way I would DCA in. Yep, no structure on this, not barely a full year of chart history. So this is just making the cut. We want at least 1 year of chart history, guys, and something that has a little better of a chart than this, but this isn't as silly as the last project I looked at. Now we're looking at Pepe. It's another crowd favorite for the cool guy club. Oh, okay. So a couple of things to say about Pepe. One, very strong move to the upside back in May 2023. So the way I pulled this fib, I think would be accurate. Then we have around October 2023. This has since gone up 4,000%. So nobody can say that this wasn't a big performer. But what I don't like about this is if we pull this on a linear scale, we're going to see it swipe up to 7 spot fib extension. That's not healthy. So at this time, sure, it can go higher, but it's already done its bull run. Like, this has already done its thing. And now what are we looking at in regards to this local correction that we've seen? Because now we're getting resistance below the 618, the golden pocket, so the golden ratio. So this is an 80% pullback from this local high. It is doing a very good job at holding these supports. So what I could do is, for fun, I could pull an additional fib. Oh, okay. So that's a dangerous thing. When your macro 1618 is in alignment with the like shorter time frame, more local fib pull 618 and a rejection there, it's a sign that this thing could have some more to give. But given like where we're at in this current bull run, I mean, we could see some support coming in pretty soon, especially with that high, this high, that chunk of volume there too, and there. So like, I mean, we're pretty close where this local, like really short-term correction could be done. It's already a 35 something percent correction. And then the next move, it shows us to around 0. Yeah, I'm not even gonna say it. But yeah, that'd be nice. 600%, that'd be nice. 4 zeros and an 8. That'd be wild. But yeah, we've already, let's see if that gets to the 10 spot. Because that's a really wild times. Oh, no. That would be way, way higher. So by the way, I messed that up. It should have been like that. Oh, yes. Okay, that is perfect. Okay, so I think I know the next high for Pepe. It's going to be. By the way, I don't want to sound, I know this always makes me sound like an asshole, but I don't mean to be. But like the Pepe craze and everyone like making their profile pictures, Pepe and all this stuff, it is like as like a grown man, this is the cringiest shit I've ever seen in my life. Like, I gotta admit. Does that make me judgmental? Sure. I don't care. I literally do not care. You're a grown man. Stop that. Where I'm from in New York, we're just like, stop that. All right, but I think I got the top. I think it's 1, 2, 3. How many zeros is that? 4 zeros and a 4. Whatever the fuck that price is. So yeah, nice. That'll be that makes sense, and maybe up to 5. Let's try to make people happy. Whoop. Sorry. We're not there yet. So that would be the zone that I would expect. And I mean, shit, if we were to have bought the bottom on that to get the full move, that's a 600, 700% move. So just consider that this has already done a full bull run. Like, there can't be too much juice left in this fruit. All right. And if you're somebody who's recently bought Pepe, yeah, that's great. I mean, if you're somebody who bought Pepe all the way down here, or like even before it was charting on this on any major Centralized exchanges, then congrats, man. Fucking awesome play. But get a new profile picture. Stop worshiping this meme. This is sad. All right, Sologenic. Where are we at? Oof. Yeah, see, like way bigger drawdown than XRP on the recent correction. Only went up because of XRP. Just should have bought more XRP, right? Because this is still 96% down from its current highs. And if we just measured off this green line, which is being very kind, it is 87% down. I've talked about this in a recent Red Pill with regards to Flare. I think IOTA, Algorand were a couple examples. Not like I'm against them, but I basically said that I think when you get into stuff like Sologenic and Flare, etc., Casper is another great example. It's like you're avoiding just buying more XRP and XLM. I think if you just kind of like only bought XRP and XLM since the last bear market, you'd be much, much better off than playing around with this stuff. But I get it. It's venture capital. Everyone wants to have like 100 different altcoin positions. And the XRP community is always trying to find like the next thing tied to XRP. You know, I think Ondo is another one that a lot of people, even though that's been a pretty nice looking chart. But I still don't think that like you have a better bet on Ondo than you do on XLM, just based on my professional opinion and technical analysis that I've done. So yeah, sure, it probably would have been better to get involved in Ondo than it would be this thing, but anyways, this is venture capital, guys. Looking at the whole fib pull from swing high to swing low, we've now just had a major surge in price. We've got rejected at a key level, and we've come straight down to the 236, and that is a good thing. That means this is about as low as it should get. So if we are to make it now back into the same zone that most things go to on the next major impulse, which is around the 702 fib, all the way up to the 888 fib, we're talking about 1,500% move, and you don't even need a new all-time high. So a little goes a long way in this, but I would be very cautious adding a large position to this. I would only want to do a typical venture capital investment of about 1 to maybe 3% max, and I would keep this particular project closer to 1%. Just what I feel based on these types of charts. Look at this, syringe bottom, top followed. We're 89% down from the current highs. It had a major move up with the XRP narrative and everything going on over there, and now it's down another 75%. So this type of chop and the hands that this thing is being traded by are very unsophisticated investors that you'd probably be better off avoiding. Not the worst looking chart in the world, but it's pretty bad. Now we're looking at Kronos. This will be the last one. Kronos, a Saturn coin tied to Saturn, obviously. Even has the hexagon logo now. They've changed that over the years. This chart, very similar to the last one we just looked at. Not a whole lot of progress in this overall trading range, considering this is where like the C19 crash was. And where are we at from that? Let's call it 4 cents. We're at 9 cents now. This is up 130%. Whilst the Bitcoin example from the C19 crash, if I put it around a similar level, Bitcoin is up a 1,500%. Like, does that shit blow your mind or what? That it would have been better to just be all in Bitcoin in the C19 crash, and you just didn't need to make any, like technical investments. You could have just been all in Bitcoin. You'd be up 1,500% right now. While this thing is pretty much done nothing, I also am not the biggest fan of this exchange, but I do still keep this exchange because they have a couple things that I could get over there that I like to invest in that have since actually been opportunities in other places. But I think Theta is one example, maybe T-Fuel. But there's a lot of options over there for getting into some more speculative altcoins. That's not my sole purpose for wanting to get involved in something like that. I don't want to waste our time today talking about my opinions on their exchange. I just think overall this chart is pretty pretty bad. So I would avoid personally investing in this. Although I do think that a run up to the 702 is in the cards, and I do suspect the 888 could be retested, but it took a lot for it to do that in the last cycle. And by the way, this was like a very isolated, coordinated event, along with Bitcoin doing some particular things into Q4 of 2021, because their exchange started to do a bunch of stuff. I don't remember the specifics, but long story short was not many things had a much larger spike into November 2021. Remember, alt season was pretty much completed back in April, May of 2021. So this had an isolated breakout into price discovery. And I actually think there's something symbolic about that for the fact that Bitcoin is created by Satoshi, that is Saturn, who gives, who creates Jupiter. Jupiter would be the Bitcoin connection, but Kronos is just purely tied 1-to-1 to Saturn. And you need to think about Saturnalia and the darker days and the connection to the black and white symbolism. So that could make sense in that way. Yeah, it did the same kind of move into Q4 of last year, whereas like it's its best move. And then still just back in the same horizontal trading range. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of altcoins look like this, so I can't like isolate this one and say it's like the worst chart in the world, but I personally have like zero desire to accumulate this thing. Just zooming out and looking at the way it traded in the past, I feel like we're kind of back at it. Just these BART heads over and over again. But I've earned this project for free just by doing referrals, and I think a lot of people have gained quite a bit from doing the referral program over with Crow. So that's nice. If you're earning this thing for free, then dope. Ride the wave. But I personally wouldn't be looking to invest in it, not at this time at least. So I'm going to wrap this one up here. These markets are kind of giving back some of the Bitcoin dominance I could see since earlier today. We have Bitcoin trading at about 105. We can see that the CME is almost the same price, so that's good. There should not be any gaps. We'll have to see how that goes when CME opens up in a little bit into our weekly close. And I think a weekly close for Bitcoin over 106 would look great. A weekly close under 103 would look bad. So if they flash us down for whatever reason after CME opens, that would probably be very coordinated and on purpose to liquidate leverage. But I think just there's too much focus on this war thing right now, and it's probably making people want to wait to see how the traditional markets open and how the Fed will how the FOMC is going to go this Wednesday. I think a lot of traders are on standby for that. So I think that's when to expect most volatility around this Wednesday, which was the purpose of today's decode. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. A little longer than I thought today's podcast would be, but all in all, it was packed with value from start to finish, and that's all that matters. Definitely might want to rewatch this one again if needed, because there's a lot of information. So appreciate and I'm grateful for every single one of you, and I'm wishing you all an amazing rest of your weekend and week ahead in the Matrix. Much love.